books, and beyond. This program also streams live on the web at tspntv.com and can be watched on demand at tspntv.com or TSPN TV's YouTube channel. And now, authors, writers, books, and beyond.
Hi. Nice to see you this Thanksgiving Eve. Guys, thank you for joining us. My name is Kathy Boyd Fellure, in case this is your very first time with the show Authors, Writers, Books, and Beyond. I'll introduce my guest to you after I talk to you a little bit about Hein & Company, right next door to the studio here. There's a wonderful bookstore, combination, everything actually. And especially this season right now, they have a Christmas tree pillar that's all decorated when you first walk in. Don't touch the books, though, because I think if you even take one, they'll fall. But there is a collection of drama, props, vintage clothing, steampunk. Upstairs, there's a new Baker Street West. And the next production, I believe, will be in the spring. You just missed the first one, but you can catch the Murder Mystery Theater later. It's nice to go with a group. And you can get Christmas gifts next door, calendars, new books, vintage books, used books. I love the vintage books. My husband's listening. And so, give them a try and check out upstairs and downstairs, take a lunch and plan to stay. They have easy chairs and a table in the front where Sarah Luck Pearson meets when she teaches workshops and writer's critique, and the coffee guys just gather. Right here on Main Street in Jackson, Hein & Company. And we're going to get into the show now. My guest tonight, I'm so excited, is my personal critique group. This is Amateur Fiction Writers. This is the Friday novel to screenplay group, part of us. On my right is Gini Grossenbacher, and on my left, John Clewett and Pamela. And supporting us here tonight is Kitty Haspel, and missing helping family is Carolyn Bakken. She's our newest member. So we're going to talk tonight about what it's like to be part of a critique group. We're a fiction group. Kind of answer some of your questions. This is actually our anniversary month. Our pilot show was a year ago, November, and John and Kitty were on with me. And so this is kind of a nice return, getting into, we'll talk about changes that have happened over the year. And we're also going to talk about our ever-changing publishing world, which even though I only meet with you once a month, every month it changes. And John has just returned from half a year in Sweden. So I'm going to start with John and let him fill us in a little on what's going on over there.
Well, it's it's getting colder, which is why I'm over here. But with regard to the literary scene, we're seeing now things that happened here about 5 or 6 years ago. Digital is starting to make some sort of an advance. Amazon is not possible yet, but will be probably within a year, from what I've heard.
I find that surprising.
Well, it has to do with the fact that we have very strict rules in Sweden regarding sales tax, and Amazon apparently was not willing to go that route. But now they've somehow or another got into some kind of an agreement anyway, so I'm very happy to hear that, so that's good.
Well, we're happy to have you back. We really missed you.
Yeah, it's great to be back, This 6 months of not having a critique group to work with has been rather difficult, but on the other hand, I was doing a translation, and I'm not sure I would have got much help from the group at that time.
I could have helped you. We don't speak Swedish. No. But how is it settling back in? I know you've been to one meeting with us. Kind of like you never left?
Yeah, more or less. Although, I get kind of culture shock every time I'm here, and I have an accent probably still from...
You do. You sound Swedish, John.
I know. I'm sorry. I will for another week or two, because I've been speaking almost entirely just Swedish for 6 months, and then when I get back here, it's sort of like, it'll take a while.
Yeah, well, we all have works in progress. Kitty does, and Carolyn does too. And I like to, not necessarily, we can't tell you everything, just so you know that we're not being rude to you. But in our profession, some things you talk about and some things you don't. And so we share with you what we can. I'd like you to share a little about, when we critique your work in progress, as much as you want to talk about it.
I really enjoy the critique group because at the very beginning, when we first form, there's kind of a hesitation to tell people what we see in their work. Yet with time and trust, we tend to grow stronger together, telling each other what we like, what's strong, what needs work. And I just find that there's an overall lift within the writing level of the entire group as a result.
I know I feel I've grown in the last year. And can you share, do you mind sharing a little, because you just went through the Amherst program? I'd love you to share about that.
Well, I'm now an affiliate of the Amherst Writers and Artists, and we held a training in Walnut Creek this summer, and Pat Schneider is our founder, and she is from Amherst, Massachusetts, hence the name. There's a large contingent of Amherst writers and trainers in the Sacramento area that was formerly called Sutter Writers. And Jan Haig and John Crandall are now part of the board on the Amherst Writers and Artists back in Amherst. So it's lovely to have that connection, and they really train us in manuscript review. So we learn how to point out what needs work, but also balanced with what is really sound and wonderful in someone's work. Because a writer is someone who writes, and that is our purpose. And whether we publish or not, that's certainly lovely. But the whole purpose is to enhance our craft through the work we do with each other.
And you do also now teach workshops.
I do. I teach, I have a critique group in my home and in Elk Grove, and I also run writing training, and I'm beginning a memoir series January 9th that will be an 8-week series in my home in Elk Grove. And there is a waiting list because we only accept 5 writers. But it's a very special experience, and we really do a lot of work with each other as we develop.
Wonderful. And Pam, you want to share a little bit about, Pam was on the waiting list to get into our group while she semi-retired. And I've been waiting to get to see her more than we workshop once a month together. So you want to share a little about what you're writing, and I guess in the short time you've been with us, maybe how our critiquing is.
The critiquing is excellent. It's just really great. I've come from another group, and the critique is different in that group. Not that it isn't valuable, but just some of the things that come out of this particular critique group is, I find, specifically strong. And when you combine a whole group of really strong writers, you see a really big difference in the kind of critiques that come out, and they become more and more helpful. What I'm working on are several novels. 2 are near completion, going through final draft processes. Yes, 2. And then I always wonder if they are really that complete or not, because I always seem to find something to go back and work on and change. But I think it's that way right up to the point that it hits the press, and that's what I've heard from a lot of published writers is, you still want to change it after it comes out. It's just a really common thing. I have 2 new ones going in bits and pieces, so I try to keep things fluid and to keep several pieces going at the same time so I don't hit writer's block. It's a good way not to hit that.
True, very true. I know Kitty, who's sitting here supporting us, we all are writing something very different, and we all bring something different into the critique group, a different area, I think, of expertise or a way we critique. But the one thing I love about this group and treasure and know I'm blessed is we all are respectful, I feel, and protect each other's voice. Because a critique group, if you're not careful, can actually destroy your manuscript. It can get picked apart, and you can lose your voice as a result of it. where I feel every one of us is very respectful in that way, knows that you write the way you write, and you know each one of us, and it's different. That's the wonder of it. That's the beauty of it. So that's my personal favorite. I don't know, John, what about you? You've been away for a while?
Yeah, well, I agree with everybody, of course. we
We're going to remind you of that.
Tradition of consensus in Sweden, but no, you're right, and I think it's based on trust and it's based on confidence. And what I've noticed is the not only the trust, but I really feel like I can put my work in your hands, and what I will get back will be better.
Yeah.
That it becomes better. It becomes more polished and more finished. And sometimes I don't agree, but that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the person holding the pen, that really
makes the decision.
Yeah, that's the one making the decision.
Well, we're going to wind down out there in TV land in a few minutes and go on a break, but keep in mind, I think the key issue really is the trust. That's huge for me. You're handing over your inner soul and every part of you to someone else and trusting them with it. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that and some more specifics, come back and see us, and we'll be waiting for you. Thanks.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN. Television network, TSPN, and now back to authors, writers, books, and beyond. This program also streams live on the web at tspntv.com and can be watched on demand at tspntv.com or TSPN TV's YouTube channel. And now back to authors, writers, books, and beyond.
Welcome back to the second part of Authors, Writers, Books, and Beyond. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our fifth annual literary read that is November 30th at Clark's Corner in Ione. And if you haven't been there yet, you really ought to make it a destination. It's a wonderful place, not just a coffee house. A lot of people think it's just a coffee house, but it is not. We meet there and critique writing. We have since they opened 5 years ago. We also host this once a year. Once a year we do a children's literary read also, separated it. We used to do them together, but we don't now. And we're going back to doing our once-a-year open mic, which is the night everybody gets to relax. So go on down to Clark's, 12 West Main Street, and it's a big yellow building. You cannot miss it. You can get really good coffee there, and my daughter's a barista, Jen. They have all kinds of events that you can... my gosh, Tuesday morning reading for children, story time. They have special events involving boxers, belly dancers, Christian music, country and western, everything you could think of under the planet, really. And Craig Clark, the owner, has done a wonderful job bringing out into the rural community. As Scott said in this article he wrote about the event, what we have in San Francisco and Sacramento for culture, we did not have there at all. So Clark's Corner, 274 Cafe. Give them a call and go get lunch, or they do prime rib dinners. You can rent the banquet room in the back. I'm renting it for my daughter's graduation from college the end of the month. And in the spring and summer, there's a lovely patio. So lots of options there. If you come this Saturday after, let's see, Black Friday, if you're tired of shopping, walked all your turkey off, you can join us for our literary read. This is a sample program Joe Sardi from our group, Monday group, did for us this year. We have a musician coming from Sacramento. Her name's Rachel Wagner. She's from my book club. She's a wonderful musician. She'll be playing, she composes and sings alternative music. She'll be opening, playing an intermission, and closing. And our guest reader is the lovely Sarah Lunsford from the Lodestar. She is also an author. So come and join us, and we'll be reading. You can hear a little bit of our work there. So we're not going to read for you today because we don't have enough time. But if you want to hear more than just 30-second blip, come on over. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the read, too, because I was influenced by Oakley Hall, who helped start the Squaw Valley Conference, And not only do you go as a paying participant for a week, but you have the option of going to free and open to the public events that included reads at 5 o'clock each evening. And I learned so much from listening to the other authors read. They had famous authors, Amy Tan and Anne Lamott, and alumni that got published. And I like to listen to authors read. So I'd like to know what you guys think about it, because I know you still show up on Saturday. Kind of a dangerous question, but what do you think about listening to the reads? When, you know, we're always writing silently, usually sequestered by ourselves, but reading out loud in front of a group, you hear yourself and you deliver, I think, your story different than anyone else would. Someone want to jump in?
I really enjoy literary reads because you get to hear how an author would play out a scene as though it were a movie or a drama, because their inflection and their intonation and their voices is really the way that author intended the piece to be read or to be heard. And I find that to be fascinating, because so often when I'm by myself reading a book, it's just sort of monotone. But when the actual writer reads that piece, it comes to life for me. And I really, really enjoy hearing the author read.
What about you two?
Yeah, same here. I've often thought that it would be really great if you could listen to Ernest Hemingway read his work, you know. It's one thing to get that voice in your head while you're reading his work, but I'm certain that we lost a lot when we didn't get him reading.
Yeah.
I just want to hear Fitzgerald read Gatsby.
That's all. That's all.
Yeah.
I know. I love, my favorite reader at SQUA is Mark Childress. I love his Southern drawl. I love his delivery of his work. I love his writing. I like to listen to Amy Tan. I enjoy the differences, and they have a literary focus there, which I happen to really enjoy literary writing. I would have liked to have heard Wallace Stegner read his work, especially Crossing to Safety. Oh, how do you guys feel about reading this weekend?
Well, it's fun. I mean, you know, my problem is usually the time involved, because my short stories may not necessarily be short enough in order to get them into the time frame. But otherwise, yeah, it's fun. It's interesting to read your work in front of other people and see if it works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing just giving it to somebody and watching them politely laugh. It's another thing when you read it and you can see them laugh, you know, or be, sort of scared or whatever. It's an entirely different feeling. You know, you get immediate feedback. It's kind of like being a musician, you know, in that way.
What do you think, Pam?
I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's the same thing. Once you get over really the fear of being up there, and that's pretty substantial, getting over that fear of reading in front of people. But then you realize that most of the people that show up at writing critiques or writing reads are really very forgiving, and they're there to hear you, and they're excited about what you're doing, and they aren't really critical. Nobody's going to throw tomatoes at you or anything. So it's
yeah, we normally you don't critique us at a read, just so you know, in case it's your first time.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's for critique group. But you know, I think also if they laugh when we need them to laugh, and also I know at our reads I've seen people cry, but we also, when we're reading it, see when we miss the mark by their reactions. So we can go home and fix that. We do a lot of fixing that. That's the thing I want to talk about next, before we get into the publishing. Killing Our Darlings. John recently took out a fairly good-sized word count.
Yeah, 10,000 words.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that was it was done during the translation into Swedish because I usually write directly in English, and there are two reasons for that. During the translation, I discovered that there were a lot of things which didn't work in Swedish, and so it was easier to just drop them. And when I did that, I then went back to the English version and said, hey, this actually got stronger if I just change that and put in another, one sentence with 15 words instead. And so I was doing that continually throughout the whole thing. So instead of being 100,000 words, it's close to 85 or 95.
That's a big deal.
Yeah,
that is a big cut.
Yeah,
it hurts.
It's painful.
It is
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
I was going to say, ouch.
Oh yeah. But on the other hand, when you're done and it's much stronger,
Clear, crisp.
then you think, this is much better.
That's, I think, too, when we find where we've maybe slipped into our work as the author. That's a lot of times, to me, what we end up taking out.
It is, yeah. You almost put it in there because you need it as a reference point for yourself to make sure you're going where you should go. And then you need to go back in and just take them out. And it's a difficult task because you really do have to decide what needs to stay and what needs to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why a critique group is so valuable, because they can tell you when you've repeated yourself, that you've already stated something, and you don't need to state it anymore. And I think that's very helpful.
I think so. I one thing we use is a suggested format for critiquing. I actually got it at a workshop 15 years ago that my friend Tanya taught, Tanya Martin. And I find that really helps me find myself in there where I don't see myself. And then I realize I've slipped into my story where I shouldn't be. And you don't want me in there. You want to read, the reader wants to read the story. Which brings me to the readers, too, before we go to break. I have readers, and I find readers, which is different than a critiquer, is invaluable. I've recently learned a very new big lesson in that aspect that I didn't know was coming. It was a little surprise. So asking someone to be a reader is a big deal too, because it's the same trust issue when you go outside your inner circle. Actually, Joe, who did the programs, was a reader first for our group for over a year before she became a critiquer. And I think, and she's an avid reader herself, and I think avid readers that read in different genres are the best reader we could get. We have a demographic we go out there we're writing for, but to get us beyond ourselves. We have a minute left. You guys want to toss something into that?
Yeah, well, critiquing is one point to make it better, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you have to know that. And you can't do a read of an entire book publicly. You can do a page or two, but the real test is to send it to somebody who reads and say, "Read this, please," and then you just hold your breath for maybe a week.
Hopefully just a week, huh? Yeah. Well, we're going to be breaking in a minute. That's something else we'll talk about. Writers face a lot of rejection, and time is a huge part of our life. Waiting. We do a lot of waiting, too. So come on back if you want to hear more about that. Thanks.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN. You're watching your local television network, TSPN, and now back to authors, writers, books, and beyond. This program also streams live on the web at tspntv.com and can be watched on demand at tspntv.com or TSPN TV's YouTube channel. And now back to authors, writers, books, and beyond.
Welcome back to Authors, Writers, Books, and Beyond. You're with the Amador Writers Friday Fiction Critique Group, novel to screenplay, and we're talking about a variety of things, including the variety in what we write and critique for each other and how that keeps it interesting for us. How I think it also is part of why we give the different advice we give. We were just, you always miss our break conversations, and it's such a shame because all the little gems really pour out there when we're relaxed. But you want to pick that up? You two were just talking real nice about that, about how we, I would be bored if we all wrote in the same genre.
Yes.
I would be, I don't know why, maybe not everybody feels that way.
Oh, definitely. I mean, well, not only bored, I would probably be scared to death. No, truly, it's a question of trust, I think, and it's much easier to sort of share the kind of work that I do, which is a little bit, straight commercial suspense, with writers of the other ladies in the group here. It's very easy for me because there's nobody else really doing that. And I think it's the same thing for you people, that you're writing in your own genre, all of us.
I think the importance is to have a fresh set of eyes, the freshest possible, that are most like a readership would be. And if the eyes are all in the same genre, I'm not sure they're as fresh, only because they're all writing the same thing. When you have people who are looking at it that aren't used to looking at it, they may not have the same preconceptions and be much more like the wider audience.
That's waiting out there for our books. I know when Pam was on a waiting list, and I'd worked with you in workshop for how many years?
Oh my gosh,
So there was trust built there.
At least, yes.
And then Carolyn, who's not here, she was in my first critique group, 20 years of trust built up. And Kitty came to us, really we didn't know Kitty. She came to us through Sarah's workshop, and she has added so much to the group. Her insights are, number one, there's a tenderness there, and she gets into the characters' heads in a way I don't, my own characters, which is so beneficial for me as the author. A lot of times we will see things in that person's work they don't see themselves, which I think is a huge help. Because sometimes, depending on how long you've been writing your one story, Pam was talking about how it's good to keep more than one going at a time. Not so much a writer's block, but I had I could write, but it wasn't as creative. Does that make sense?
I think that the creative process is one that needs constant rejuvenation because things grow stale very fast.
They do.
Especially when you're looking at the 4th, 5th, and 6th draft of your own chapter or scene. And you need to be mixing it up all the time because you can tend to just blather on writing the same stuff.
That's the first draft.
Yeah.
And that's another humbling thing. Go ahead.
You lose perspective on whether or not it's even any good anymore if you're too deep into it because you've been working on it for so long.
Yeah, that's first drafts are not what goes in the book, people. Just in case you don't know, we go through many drafts. You don't want to read our first drafts. And that's a big thing. That's the hugest, one of the biggest areas of trust for me is also handing over a first draft to this group. It's a very humbling experience. It is not your best work. It is not polished, not even close. And so you're going to be getting back a marked up manuscript. It's not going to be, oh, lovely, lovely. That's not what we're here for. At least I'm not. I don't think any of us are, or we can't grow. And I think your critique group also helps you out of the rut. I mean, I think we're almost like, sometimes I feel like you guys are there for me and I'm down in the pit, or I'm going, no, I'm not even a good writer. Oh, and someone will reach down and lift you out when you need the hand. And because we do, as Gini was saying during break, our characters talk to us in our heads. That's normal.
My characters talk to me, and they also summon me to the page. I have to write. There are times when one of the characters will be speaking so loudly in my head that I have to write, the next scene or the next idea pertaining to that character. And I think there's a level of insanity that goes on here, but, You know, and the conversations, the dialogues that go on continue at night.
Yeah, sometimes I think we write through the night.
Yeah, it can be hard to shut down sometimes. Yeah.
Without coffee, mind you. Don't need it because you can't stop.
Yeah.
And I also find reading yourself as you're writing, reading other writers, just is very, very important. I find that the best writers improve my writing. And when I'm reading them, my writing will pick up a notch.
That's so true.
And if I get stuck, a lot of times I'll go look at somebody I really, really like. They may not be writing the same thing at all, and their voice may be totally different, but if they're a good writer, then I can aspire to improve on the page when I look at them.
I go back to Sally Bowman's The Sisters Mortland. Love that story. Love that it's told in 3 perspectives. Love that it's set in England. And if I just want to read for joy and pleasure, and she does it so well, it can be done very poorly. It helps improve my own writing. What do you read for that?
It depends. Sometimes I go back to the Swedish writers. Henning Mankell is one that I enjoy reading, and he writes a specific kind of detective or suspense novel. And I don't know how many he's written for the same character, but he's a very good writer, and I learned a lot from just going back and see how he solved certain problems, plot problems and character problems and things like that. And we all run into that, but it's very interesting to see how successful writers really pull it off.
Pull it off. Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, pretty can be interesting. Who do you read?
Well, I've been reading Antoinette May's The Sacred Well, which is, of course, she's a foothill writer and of very great note. And her technique of pulling in metaphor throughout her episodes and her scenes is one that I aspire to. So that when I'm running stale, I can pick her up. Also, I notice that the more I write, the more I see what techniques other writers are using that was, foreign to me before. I'm more aware of the tricks and techniques they use. Very helpful.
It takes a while to develop that skill too. You'll be writing a number of years before you really start to see those techniques in use. And then when you really start to be able to see them, it's just pretty staggering. Oh, I know exactly what they're doing there. It's different.
And conferences and workshops help with that. I don't think we can grow unless we participate in a conference, which is threatening at first. My first conference, I was scared to death, to be honest. And it was a pitch conference, and I didn't know. I didn't know what that was. But all the other workshops that were open in the main major morning session was invaluable to me. And then the workshops, that's how I met Pam, was at Antoinette's 5 First Pages, the Noah Lukeman workshop. Then that little workshop is one of the little gems of my writing life.
Yeah, and I'm working on her big conference this year, which has been just so much fun. And we managed to get the person we really wanted to get for the main dinner speaker. And she's very, very excited about that.
That's wonderful.
It is wonderful.
And
it's
that's
very
a
exciting.
wonderful, she calls that a boutique conference.
Yeah.
It's very personal and bonding. I think writers have an opportunity. Not that we don't at a big conference. A big conference can be just as valuable, but smaller groups. And I'm really thrilled you're working on it with her.
It's so much fun. I can't tell you. I have to get some work done this week, though.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, while I'm off, to keep up with things.
Well, what's the fun part of our job besides the voices that speak to us?
I think that a writer has to write.
Yes.
I think that it is an itch that cannot be scratched enough. And it is just a wonderful experience to be able to put it out.
Yeah.
And it's a calling, it's a mission, it is just an incredible force. I've had it ever since I was about 8.
Yeah, me too.
That storytelling and having to write things down. And as a shy child, that was my way of communicating with the world. And it continues to this day.
Well, we have 1 minute left. You guys want to share, and then we can come back to that too.
Yeah, I started very early. I wrote poetry at first. I wrote this very tragic beat poetry, which was my real interest when I was younger. And I was
That's very you, Pam.
It is very you. Yes, so I was a real fan of some of the early beats, and progressed from there, I think, in a different direction that I wouldn't have thought I'd progress in as a writer.
That was quite an era.
It was quite an era, yeah.
Well, we're going to have to go to a break for a little bit, but when we come back, we'll go right to John and let him chime in there. And you are more than welcome to come back and join us. I know some of you are baking pies and getting ready for Thanksgiving, but you're more than welcome to continue with us when we come back on screen. Thanks for the first 3 segments.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN. You're watching your local television network, TSPN, and now back to authors, writers, books, and beyond. This program also streams live on the web at tspntv.com and can be watched on demand at tspntv.com or TSPN TV's YouTube channel. And now back to authors, writers, books, and beyond.
Welcome back for our last part of the show. My name again is Kathy Boyd Fellure, and you're here with Gini and John and Pam. And we're going to go right back to John because that's where we left off. We were talking about when we knew we might want to be a writer.
Yeah, well, it began in either the first or second grade with a teacher who wanted to gain control over the class. Very smart woman. And so she had us write a class newspaper. And we were writing in columns longhand. And then someone helped us out and typed out these columns, and they were eventually mimeographed, and we were so proud to have this fantastic class newspaper, which we had done, and telling everybody in the entire world how much we were learning. It was fantastic.
Oh.
And I knew then sort of, that, okay, I can do this,
Interesting. I know second grade, Sister Mary Magdalene was encouraging us to use our imaginations, and I couldn't help but write it down. I remember I wrote with a pencil first on paper by hand. Anything that popped into my head. So things were popping into my head way back then. And back then they thought you weren't paying attention, but you know what? She encouraged the creativity. She didn't discourage it. And so for each of us, it's different. We were asking Kitty during break about hers, and I don't know Carolyn's, but I think it's very deep-seated part of us. It's ingrained into our being, and the fiber is never separated, is it? It's always there.
It's always there.
And I also think we're also great procrastinators in some ways. We can be very disciplined writers. Or maybe I'm speaking for myself here. I can procrastinate. Pinterest is my new procrastination. I take a 10-minute break and read other things about writers on there and look at pretty pictures and make boards. But I do set a 10-minute time limit. But when I'm stuck, I need to take my mind somewhere else. What about you?
Well, I get stuck occasionally. And what happens is I have a way to solve that for me. I'll try to figure out why I'm stuck. And the way I usually solve it is I'll take the scene that I'm dealing with. I usually write in a third person. So I'll take the scene that I'm dealing with and take one of the characters who is causing the problem and have him write down in the first person what he really thinks and wants to do, and that usually solves it.
That's so smart, John.
I think it's brilliant. Actually, when you told us that the other day, I thought, wow, this is awesome.
It really, for me, it works. It really works well. And then I can go back and take one more character and do the same thing, And then all of a sudden I've got maybe 2 pages of dialogue and personal feelings about what was causing a problem before, and then I just integrate it, and then I'm off running again.
You know, I found recently in the book I am working on, the character that came in that you all know well, he took me in a direction I didn't want to go with him. I did not want to go in that. That wasn't my total plan. And you have to let your character take you where they want to go.
Yes.
They write the story. They have a life of their own. And I am now near finished, and I am very happy I let him take me there. Rather than, we have to be flexible.
Yeah, I agree. I probably have become much more rigid with regard to planning than I was before. The first book, it wrote itself. I didn't really plan it in that way. But after that, I started to make these little plans. And then when I went back and looked at the way I'd done the first book, I recognized that all I really did for about 3 days was write a book plan. And then that was 1 sentence for every scene, and then go back and flesh out the scene. I didn't really realize that that's how I should do it. I just did it.
I know Jim Scott Bell, he's written a couple books on writing, and I have over my desk, there should be a surprise in every scene. And if I go back and I find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scenes, nothing, it's inspiring to realize that creativity, it isn't always, sometimes we have to help it with what we've learned. It's spontaneous and then it isn't. Writing seasons come and go. If you look at the writers from all time, pretty much if you look at their lives, they're not set in stone by any stretch of the word.
No.
Very creative souls have very creative lives. And that's one thing I love about our critique group, where we have about 10 minutes left, is the creativity. I think one person's creativity spurns another on, and it encourages. Trust and encouragement, that's the other group I would use to describe our group, is encouragement, where writers can get very discouraged.
The one thing I like about our group, too, is that you feel as though you have 4 or 5 allies with you who believe in your cause. And I don't want to use cheerleaders because it's been overused, but it's like that. You have people in your court. They care about your success. And they're willing to suggest changes for you that really do help your work along. And all it takes is for the author or the writer to have an open mind and to allow those changes to come in. Because isolated in my cell, writing by myself, I'm not going to see those things. And that really enriches the pieces.
And we do face a lot of isolation in the
One
actual writing
of the
process.
amazing things about critique groups that I've learned over the years that we actually work together is that I can look at your work and see immediately something that I thought, well, that should be obvious. And then you critique my work, and it's exactly the same thing, but I didn't see it. You know, and it's very strange.
So
this
true.
happens all the time, and so it allows me to open my eyes more or less, you know, because I never would have seen these things, but I learn by going to your work, and then all of a sudden I think to myself, my goodness, you know, I could.
I think that's one of the really big keys, is that does indeed happen. You see something in someone else's that is obvious to you, and you can point it out, and then you think, oh, this will help me spot that same thing that I've done, or a missed opportunity, especially those missed opportunities. Yeah. And if you're very respectful of the other writer, those missed opportunities are really something that you can suggest. And if you don't have the right critique group, a lot of times some suggestions will come out that don't work well. And so that's where that trust really does come in, I think.
And that respect of voice. Scott wrote
Respected
about
voice,
that.
yes.
Scott's a writer also, not just a journalist. And the key, he asked me during the interview, what was the most important thing to you when you started it? And I said, it needed to be constructive critiquing, not destructive criticism.
Yes.
Some writers never recover from that. They
Oh.
never write again. Seriously. It's devastating. And so the key was, we're building each other up. We're not shining each other on. But we are building each other up because it takes strength to finish the journey. It's a journey.
Yep.
And the destination is not the most important thing. It's the journey there. And, these are my companions and my comrades, my friends, and my critiquers who need to point out to me, oh, boy, you really missed the boat. And you need to hear that because I might be thinking, oh, look, I really nailed it. And I didn't. And that's a hard thing to tell somebody. You have to deliver it. I think honesty and delivery is important too. Honesty with kindness, but not, tempered, but not, I don't want to hear what you think I want to hear. We don't do that at all.
I think just the whole atmosphere that the leader provides in manuscript review, critique groups is key. If you have a leader like you, Kathy, who really cares about the development of the group and really wants them to advance, it's going to come through.
I think it's a uniting of our hearts together. It's almost like we become one heartbeat, don't you think? But I mean, we're separate into each other, and I get excited. Like Kitty, you can't see Kitty, but I know her book is going to make such a difference. I knew it from the beginning. And you have to believe in the writer and the story like that. You really have to be able to believe in them like that to work together.
I read it 3 times.
And sometimes, we go over our manuscripts over a couple-week period. I'll read it for just pleasure. Not because I have to, but because it's a joy to read. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I go thinking, how can I hand this out? But I love what I get back in. After critique group night, I go to my room and I turn on the little night, not a light light, the lamp, and I'm in bed with all the manuscripts, and I just read them through. Mark them up, I just read them through. And that's joy for me. I don't know. You guys want to add something? We're kind of on the countdown. Got about 3 minutes left. And
I would agree with everything you said. I totally do
30
the same
seconds. 30 seconds, not 3 minutes. Okay, well.
Well, patience, I think, also. This group has a lot of patience, and that's good for me because I keep making these terrible errors, and you keep telling me, and it takes maybe 6 months or 8 months for me to understand what you're telling me, and then finally I'll discover it.
And on that, we're going to end. We love John, just so you know. We're not mean. Bye. Thanks a lot for joining us. Come back again.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.